You hear that?
Not really.
Okay, good. My chair's a lot louder than it used to be. Did you hear that one?
Yeah, that was like a little squeak type sound.
Yeah, it's a squeak sound.
Yeah, don't do that.
I'll take that out. I need to build some AI into this application to auto remove the squeak sound.
Hello.
Hey, what's going on?
It's another exciting day in paradise.
How is it? Is it crazy hot down there in Philly?
It's not hot. It's just humid.
Yeah.
Like 300% humidity, if I guess.
Yeah.
That's what it is
I
here
think
too.
it's about the same, yeah. And by the way, that is the first time I've ever heard Philadelphia referred to in the same sentence as paradise, but
oh my God.
Hey, wow. We're aware of where we live.
You know, like the partners listen to this podcast, right?
Well, are we recording?
It's not just non-Philly residents that listen. Yeah, I'm always recording, man. That's the first rule.
Your whole life you're recording?
So we had our own little bit of tragic news here. We lost one of the Propelics chickens.
No.
Ned, you might be saying, why would Steve bring up a chicken at the opening of a podcast? Well, it's because it's been a theme, and they've come up in several episodes.
I was going to say, have they been a guest on the podcast? That's important.
And I like to think that they're sort of a beloved mascot of Propelics.
Much like the Trump tax chicken, who, among some of us, is a beloved mascot.
I don't know what that is, but it sounds like
tax chicken.
You don't know about the tax chicken? Go Google it. Just right now.
Don't tell people to Google tax chicken; they'll never come back.
No, Trump tax chicken.
Well, I mean, you can pause the podcast and check it and then come back. It's
rule number 2: nobody comes back. You should know this stuff. You got to keep them locked in. You've got to hold them captive. You give them one call to action, and that's it. Right now, the call to action is keep listening. Don't shut it off. Everybody, welcome to Device Squad, the podcast for the mobile enterprise from Propelics. Device Squad, fighting crimes against enterprise mobility worldwide. Bad UI, frustrating user experiences, poorly conceived mobile strategies, we defeat them all. This podcast series will cover all aspects of enterprise mobility, including strategy, development, design, testing, and more. My name is Steve Brickman. I'm a mobile strategist and UX architect with Propelics. First, a brief history of the company. Founded in 2011, Propelics is a mobile strategy consultancy helping enterprises worldwide devise true mobile strategies and develop world-class mobile applications across all industry verticals. Propelics clients include large companies like Amway, Bright Horizons, Bank of Montreal, Dubai Airports, Family Dollar, DLL, Cintas, Merck, and many more. Propelics' menu of services includes 8 different mobile kickstarts, covering everything from mobile strategy and road mapping to MCOE to UI UX design to mobile testing strategy, along with soup to nuts app design development and support. Additionally, Propelics offers 3 homegrown enterprise mobile products. All right, so the chicken died, and the chicken was only a year old, and it was a very sad day for us here at the Brickman household, because we got the chickens as therapy for my daughter, which sounds completely ludicrous, but it was and is still working. You know, she really loves these chickens, and the real reason why I mention it, because the other chickens, like, they barely seemed to even notice that she was gone, which is very strange. But then again, what are they supposed to do? They're just chickens. What do I expect them to do? Like, they're going to sit Shiva for a week?
In your house, they should be kosher chickens. They should sit Shiva.
They're going to, like, cover up the mirrors in the coop, right?
Well,
the windows.
They could rip a feather.
They're going to block the window. Right.
Who knows how a chicken grieves? Maybe.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, Jumbo has, like, new noises that she makes now. So maybe she's trying to, reach Marsha in the netherworld for chickens.
The great chicken coop in the sky.
The great beyond.
Do you think they're gonna have a chicken seance?
It was a sad affair. So the topic for today, we are going to be talking about what is going on with cell phone sales. Are they flagging? Are they not? At the very least, why is there so much discussion around this? Why do people think that they're flagging even if they're not flagging? And any other auxiliary topics that you guys introduce at any point during the podcast. And the reason I bring up the chicken thing is because I'm wondering if us, like the chickens, will soon simply forget that cell phones even existed if they are replaced by a new and better technology.
Oh, see, I thought you were going like down the Chicken Little avenue where we could be saying that the sky is falling, but cell phone sales aren't falling.
That's good too. That might be even better.
Why choose?
We could go with that. If you like Ned Bellavance's analogy, press 2. So welcome to Device Squad, the podcast for the mobile enterprise from Propelics and Anexinet Company. Today we have on the podcast Glenn Gruber, Senior Mobile Strategist with Propelics, and Ned Bellavance, Cloud Solutions Director with Anexinet. Is there
as much as I direct the clouds, they never do what I want them to.
And it's Bad Joke Monday.
All right, that's where we're starting.
Okay. It's all I got, man. It's been a long Monday.
Is there anything more I need to add to your title, Ned? Other than that, is that sufficient?
No, you could mention that I've got some podcasts too, but maybe that's like an ending note.
Oh no, that's good. I'll mention it. How about up front and at the end?
Whoa!
Right. In addition to directing the cloud services, you have not one but 2 podcasts that you manage.
Yeah. I'm a glutton for punishment.
I don't know how you do that. And they are called Buffer Overflow and the Anexipod.
That is correct, sir.
Yeah. And those are great. Those are both great. I think a little more technical than this one tends to be, but
well, I don't know. Buffer overflow, it tends to get a little silly, much more so than an Exapod.
Right.
We haven't brought any chickens on the show yet, but the night is young.
Well, that's kind of our claim to fame. So, don't mess.
Well, I don't want to copy.
Yeah.
I'll just be inspired.
Yeah, it's actually, Ned, what you may want to think about is bees. I saw something on, I guess it was maybe the Daily Show the other day that, there are people, like the chickens thing was like really big, but now people have moved on from chickens, and beekeeping in the backyard is all the rage.
That's really funny because I actually have been thinking about getting some bees.
Oh my God.
Who doesn't?
All right, none of this is making any sense. Let's get into this here. So here's where we'll start. CNN Money on April 20th of this year, they put out an article that says Apple sinks on fears of slowing iPhone sales. Morgan Stanley's Katy Huberty slashed her iPhone shipment projections for the quarter ending in June on Friday, citing weakness in China. Canaccord Genuity's Michael Walkley also cut his iPhone sales forecasts and cut his earnings estimates for Apple as well. Chief financial officer of a key Apple chip supplier, Taiwan Semiconductor, warned of mobile softness and continued weak demand when it reported earnings this week.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
So let's start out with anything about Apple is awesome clickbait. So that could be part of why it's reported. We can look at the supplier stuff, which it's actually, Taiwan Semiconductor is a very significant supplier of the iPhone, but let's also not forget that they sell to more people than just Apple. So just because there's weakness overall doesn't, mean that there's weakness with the iPhone, as the CNN story probably conflates. And also as you look into Q3 for Apple, you're getting into that quarter just before the announcement of the next iPhone. So you're always seeing Apple continue to sell off their current inventory and not start building up inventory at that point, because they're starting to get into new manufacturing of the new devices, which will start to ramp as we come out of the summer. So there's a lot of things that kind of make it look like things are terrible, that don't always do so. And while I do think that there may be some softness in the overall smartphone market, this doesn't normally get called out on the other suppliers, just because, again, going back to why CNN wrote the story, is possibly because it gets a lot of clicks every time you say something about Apple, especially if it's negative. So, and that's just kind of a tried and a true story for years.
That's a pretty insightful answer, especially when you consider April 30th, the CNN tech article, they kind of ramped up the rhetoric. Apple faces Wall Street panic over iPhone. Maybe they hadn't gotten enough clicks.
Yes,
and then
Apple on panic, and that's super clickbait.
Yeah, Apple, we're really panicking over at Apple. Apple stock fell this month after one of its key chip suppliers warned of continued weak demand. And then Daniel Ives, an analyst with GBH Insights, wrote that Wall Street was in, quote, full panic mode over iPhone sales ahead of Apple's earnings report.
So is that GBH analyst, is that like a real analyst firm? I've never heard of them, but go on.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
I got it confused with bovine growth hormone myself.
Well,
so
he's not wrong in the sense that the stock went from like $178 and on April 18th and dropped down to what was kind of a low at the time of 164. So he's not wrong in that something did happen with the stock, but it's more just on the fact that lots of news outlets decided to report or re-report the stuff that was on CNN about the statement that Taiwan Semiconductor made. So was there any issues with Apple in general, or was it just the FUD being spread by all the different news outlets?
Yeah, and while we're talking about articles and dates, let me go to May 1st. Apple reports second quarter results. Revenue grows 16%, EPS grows 30%. You actually have real quarter-on-quarter decline because the other quarter was going to be higher, but year-on-year growth, and average sales price continues to be up significantly from prior years because of the success of the iPhone 10.
Yeah, best March quarter ever.
Yeah. So I think that the only time I would start to panic about Apple is when Luca Maestri, the CFO of Apple, starts to tell me to panic, because they've been pretty spot on in terms of their quarter-to-quarter guidance. Not always perfect, but usually pretty close. So again, when Luca starts panicking, then I think the rest of us might want to start panicking about it. But unless and until that happens, it's feels more clickbaity to me.
Right. And in terms of how they do report their results, I'm not sure, I didn't look this up, but do they actually report out phone sales specifically, or just devices in general, so inclusive of iPads and their watch and everything else?
So in their product, in their financial summary, they do have they report by segment, geographic segment, and then they report by product, which breaks down to iPhone, iPad, Mac, services, and other. So the iPhone, on a units basis, year on year was up 3%, and revenue was up 14%. Again, just showing this strength in average sales price because of the iPhone 10.
Okay, so that doesn't sound like a decline.
No, generally not. Now, sequentially, if you go Q1 to Q2, sure, you've got a 32% decline, but that is consistent with just about every other year. So, that's why I think that you have to really understand the cadence of Apple's sales cycles to put the raw numbers in context. And also, especially the supplier stuff, sometimes it gets me because, if Apple did let's just say one last big purchase so that they could have inventory of some of the component parts to get them through the rest of the product cycle before the new September announcement, then yes, it's going to look like, hey, we had a great quarter, and then, oh my God, we had a terrible quarter from the component supplier side, because they're not, it's not being presented in that same way. And also understand that with Apple, they are rarely in a position where they have a single supplier. Sometimes they do. So sometimes when you get a couple of these folks in the supply chain saying that things are going up or down, and primarily they squawk when things are going down, the chicken reference. That could be because there's been a shift in supply from supplier A to supplier B. So, again, there's a lot to, if they've got one of the most complex supply chains, in the world. And so there's a lot to trying to work through what these statements really mean overall.
So you think this is all just related to Apple's release schedule? Like this, June 8th, CNN says Apple warns suppliers that iPhone demand is falling. They told suppliers to manufacture 20% fewer components for its upcoming iPhones.
But it also depends on the ramp plan and what they look at the mix between this device versus that device. Now, none of everything that I've said is not to say that there has not been general softening in demand for smartphones in general. And I think that there are some really good and logical reasons for that, which we can get into. But I often, again, I look at what Luca tells me more so than the whispers from the supply chain in terms of what's really going to happen. Because remember, if the analyst is wrong, the analyst is wrong. If the guidance that comes out of Apple starts to swing significantly in a negative direction, they've got real problems, both from a market cap perspective, and I'm sure that there's someone who will come up with some sort of lawsuit that they got improper guidance.
What if, smartphone demand is decreasing? What would be causing that? I feel like is more interesting because I think personally I'm less interested in upgrading my phone.
Well, no. I mean, I do think that like I said, there's a lot of good reasons behind why demand is beginning to flatten out, if not decline. For one, over the past decade, you had gangbusters growth, in smartphones, but we've started to get to a point where pretty much anyone on the planet that has more than two nickels to rub together, where there's cellular coverage, already has a smartphone or some smart device. So that growth of reaching new markets is really reaching an end. And so now you have to look at more on, well, what's the replacement cycle? And what's the impetus for people to buy the next brand new phone? I mean, some people will do it for the fashion aspect. Some people will do it because they want the latest and greatest. But that's the minority, not the majority of the market. I think that you do have issues where the devices are, they're so powerful that they're good enough for what a lot of people do. And
Right.
so you see people stretch from, the 2-year cycle, which, we're used to a longer ownership cycle.
Yeah, I feel like that carries over with, desktop, laptop as well, and the trend is that, a new product will come out, and then subsequent to that, a new technology will come out, a new software technology will come out that will require users to upgrade to a faster machine. So like in the past, I'd say the trend was like audio recording, and then video processing required a faster computer. And I just remember being personally frustrated trying to process video, and that became, a necessary upgrade. So with the phones, I imagine the same thing, and they just have to keep coming up with new technologies to make our phones not be fast enough to process them anymore. And I think the latest one has got to be it's got to be like AR, right? Augmented reality. I mean,
Right. Will that be the killer app that everyone needs to upgrade their device for? Or is AR a different device category that's going to emerge that will be in addition to your phone? Because, I mean, there was a time when tablets were not really a device category. And to a certain degree, the iPad sort of invented that niche and kept it strong. And other competitors have obviously come into the tablet market. But for all intents and purposes, that's a product segment that Apple just willed into existence. So is AR another opportunity to will a new device category into existence? So
yeah,
I just want to rewind it a little back to
yeah,
the presupposition that we've saturated the existing market with smartphone devices. And I think, Glenn, you mentioned that anybody who has two nickels to rub together has probably already purchased a smart device, provided that they have cellular coverage. But I feel like, especially in emerging countries, that cell coverage is rapidly expanding. And so I think there's still an underserved market in those emerging countries that are going to need that, or going to be purchasing smartphones of some kind.
Yeah, I mean, there is. I mean, and that growth is still something that will come, but it's almost like maybe you can get some more units out of it, but you also have to look at the raw revenue dollars as well, because the type of devices that those, the emerging markets are purchasing are not the type of devices that, in the enterprise world that we think about, whether it's, the iPhone or the Samsung Galaxy series, where you're, or even ruggedized devices where you've got average sales prices of, $800 and up. That's not what they're buying. They're buying $50 devices, $100 devices,
Right.
yeah.
super cheap, low power. The devices themselves are almost relatively inexpensive at that point compared to the cost of the data for them, and how much are they really going to use it. So, yes, there's potential unit growth, but even that, I mean, it's flattening out. I mean, you have billions of people with devices. Yes, there are 7 billion people on the planet, but the further you get into that, the lower your adoption rate is going to be, and the lower disposable income that they have to put into something, like a smartphone,
Right.
when like food would be good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Generally speaking, food before smartphone.
yeah, so that's why I
Water.
say that we're getting, towards the top of this asymptotic curve of overall smartphone growth, because there's less and less people, who are going to buy devices that are going to be moving the market revenue needle.
Right.
So that's one piece of it, and also those people in that next billion or next 2 billion people don't have the same requirements from a data or processing perspective, again, to purchase the latest and greatest. They can look at someone who, you can go from the 2-year cycle. Maybe they can afford, they can deal with a 4-year cycle because they're just not, pushing the device far enough for it to matter. Look at, I'll look at my parents. They happen to get new phones every couple of years because that's kind of what AT&T has, tricked them into doing. But like, my mom plays Bubble Buster and stuff like that. Like, it's, she checks her email. Like, she's not doing the types of things with her device that scream to say that you need to upgrade now. So I think that's another reason why you see this stretching of the device upgrade cycle. And then another thing that I think maybe not a lot of people necessarily think about, but a big reason why the cycle is also stretched out is the way, at least in the US, that we've changed how we buy cell phones. Like I said, my parents are tricked in, almost, quotes, tricked into getting a new device every 2 years because they're used to, being on a 2-year contract. Like, that's not how you buy phones anymore. Yes, you can get them financed over 2 years, but then you can keep your phone or you can buy your phone outright, from the beginning and not have to have that part of your monthly bill to Verizon or AT&T or T-Mobile or Sprint. So because the way that you pay for the device has changed, your incentive to upgrade is completely different. Because after the 2 years, you can just hold onto your phone and just now go down to paying your data rate. Think about it. Like, if you purchase a car, you can lease, and you've got a $399 payment every year till the end of time. Because you're constantly releasing a new device. Or if you buy a car, maybe you pay it off after 4 years, but you keep it for another 4 where you don't have those payments. So I think the financing of the devices has also changed that upgrade cycle.
Yeah, there's also the idea that, at least with the new iPhones, they're just too expensive. That could be inhibiting sales as well.
It could be, but they're still selling a lot of iPhone 8 and 8 Pluses. But the iPhone 10 is definitely the number one selling iPhone. And again, if you look at the increase in the average sale price for Apple, you can see that in that, that's gone from, I don't know, something around $650 to about $750. And that's only because people are buying more of the expensive phones and less of the cheaper phones.
But I think the trend is definitely there, right? February 7th, seen that article that China's phone sales fell 4.9% in 2017, and that the market slid 15.7% year over year last quarter. And then CNN, again, from April 27th, Chinese smartphone sales suffer biggest decline ever, plummeting more than 21% in the first quarter of 2018 compared with the same period last year.
Yeah, but again, let's try and then segregate the conversation between, we started out talking about, Apple performance versus market performance. So it is, both Apple having, flat, say flat-ish sales and the market declining overall. Both of these things can be true at the same time, especially when you consider that in most countries other than the US, Android is, dominant. In the US, it's 50-50. In some countries, it's 90-10 to Android. And a lot of the Android users are, especially depending on what country you're talking about, are not buying the most high-powered phone. They are buying that, $100, $200, $300 device, and those are the same people who are not really pushing that device to its limits, and therefore are able to hold on to it longer. It's not like when we see declining smartphone sales that people don't have phones anymore. You just have the same phone longer.
Right, and those devices that the lower end market is buying. I mean, Android even came out with a version, or say Google came out with a version of Android called Android Go that specifically targets those type of devices. So, yeah, it's a big market segment. But like you said, if those devices are $50 or maybe even less, the ratio of how many units you have to ship to have the same revenue is like 8-1.
Exactly. And it, again, not everyone is doing swimmingly. There was just an article in the journal. What date was that? Yeah, it's just like July 5th, just talking about Samsung having, lower operating profit growth, came in short of expectations. But to me, the stunning thing there is that the Galaxy S9 series is down about, if I recall correctly, about 40% versus the level of sales, and that's their flagship phone, obviously, of when the Galaxy S7 came out. So, not everyone is growing at the same pace.
Right. So let's say a new technology comes out. I'm going to stick with AR, and we don't have to look like a cyborg. We don't have to wear some kind of giant device on our face. And somehow we're able to, have this digital layer with us all the time, which is both great and frightening. I mean, how quickly are people going to dump cell phones? Is this going to be like,
Well, how quickly did we adopt them?
Yeah, exactly.
Think about it. The iPhone came out in 2007. So the concept of a real modern indispensable smartphone, I mean, it took a few years to ramp up. So let's say it's less than a decade old. The idea that we all have this little glass screen that we stare at, several hours a day instead of a larger glass screen, that's a fairly new concept. And it might be the sort of thing where that only keeps going for another 5 to 10 years before a newer innovation like AR completely replaces the concept of a smartphone with something that, we'd be stressed to, or it'd be difficult to imagine exactly what that interface would look like. In the same way, it would be hard to imagine what modern smartphones would look like in the year 2000.
And then assuming that does happen and let's say it experiences rapid adoption like smartphones did, is there going to be like another cultural divide?
Before I say yes or no, what do you mean?
Yeah. You could sort of pick that apart a little bit.
Well, where like countries that are still adopting smartphones are now a whole device behind.
I think they might just leapfrog it in the same way that a lot of those markets never went through the process of buying a full desktop PC or a laptop and just skipped straight from no internet service, no phone service to having a smartphone. They might leapfrog the next technology, or if it's affordable enough, skip smartphones and go straight to that.
Yeah, I think there's so much to know about how quickly folks can drive down the cost curve from a manufacturing perspective, because you're talking about some significantly newer technologies. You're talking about miniaturization at even yet another level than what we did with, actually the phones got larger when you went from flip phones to smartphones. So now you're trying to drive the price down and also the size of the device down. And those, two forces usually work against each other and not with each other. So I think that a lot of it is looking at how fast they can drive down the manufacturing cost to see when we hit an inflection point of shifting, if we do shift from, product A to product B, from smartphone to whether it be smart glasses or, who knows what else is being thought of right now.
Yeah. Do you think there's any other technology? I mean, we sort of have seen it with Apple pushing some of the technologies of, I don't even know what you call it, like the facial tracking technologies where you can turn yourself into a panda bear and that kind of stuff. Like
An emoji.
Huh?
An emoji.
Yeah, that's right. They're really, it sounds like they're really starting to reach for a new technology that will require people to buy faster phones, even if it's not an essential technology like video processing. And maybe gaming is another one where they'll come up with more advanced games that require faster phones.
Yeah, I mean, I think things like what you're seeing with the sensor bar, otherwise known as the notch area, which is pretty much a mini, Microsoft Kinect. That will allow for a little bit more to be possible in the world of AR, because now you can, as you sometimes see in like science fiction or Iron Man, where someone scans a thing and then all of a sudden you get like this digital copy of it that you can begin to manipulate. So now you're leading into AR and mixed reality, but you need a mechanism to be able to read that physical object to digitize it. And the however many little dots of light that come out of that sensor bar to track and map not just your face in 2D but in 3D can be used for doing a lot more. It's actually, I believe, during WWDC when they were talking about the next generation of AR kit, the sensor bar is the first part of it. Eventually maybe you'll have one that actually faces the other direction too, so that as you're looking at things, you can map them. But they are doing some really good work just using the rear-facing camera that we have to be able to map the environment in which you're at. So not everything will require the sensor bar, but that's something that you would need. And potentially, I forget who I heard saying something about this, but the sensor bar, if you could make it really small enough, would be fabulous if it could fit in the part of the glasses that are on the bridge of your nose, because that's a perfect spot for it.
Right.
It wouldn't look super ugly. That could be the prism by which the device can kind of experience the world. Then you've got a lot of potential, but then you also have to get the silicon small enough and deal with power management so that the AR glasses or whatever will last long enough for all this to be of utility. Because when you're taking in all that data, you've got a lot of processing that needs to go on in the device to make sense of whatever it is seeing. I mean, I think that there's also things you probably need to take a look at how, Apple launched the watch originally, was it 4 or 5 years ago now? At first it was wholly dependent on the iPhone to do all of the data processing that went on. It was just really more of a view to what the phone could do for you. And then more and more, the chipset in the watch got faster. They were able to release more of the processing and the functionality to the watch itself. And now with the Apple Watch 3 with built-in LTE, you can't do everything that you can do on the iPhone, but it's a lot more of a standalone device than it was when the watch was first released a few years ago. It's some really amazing technology that's in an incredibly small footprint, and I think that it's going to be used more and more. Like a lot of times you just see these things that are test beds for that they've got a vision going out for a few years of what they're going to do, but you're at the beginning you're only seeing the most simplest things that it could possibly do.
Right.
And in future years, we'll see more maybe in iOS 12 and 13, 14, just greater capability that the same, functional piece of tech is going to be able to do just via software.
Right. So, I mean, if we think about sort of what are the components of a modern smartphone and what takes up the most real estate, I mean, today it's the battery. Takes up what, like 90% of the phone or something. And then it seems like the lenses and speakers actually have to take up a decent amount of capacity. If we're thinking of a future where, let's say, we could sort of split off some of these functions to ancillary devices. So like that sensor bar, instead of that living on your phone, that lived on glasses that you wear or something along those lines. And the speaker, rather than that being embedded in the device, that just linked to earbuds that are always in or something along those lines.
You
Yeah.
need, like AirPods.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so to a certain degree, the smartphone, rather than being your main screen for interaction, actually becomes just a brick that's full of a battery and that guts of the compute that you need to process all the information that's coming from these ancillary devices. In the same way that today a lot of smartphones lean on the cloud to do the heavy lifting when it comes to some processing, and then they do local processing as well. I think, Steve, you'd ask sort of what's a new technology that's coming down the road that's going to sort of enable that next jump, and that's probably one of them, the enabling technologies, is going to be 5G, and that's 5G both in the communications with devices over a decent range, but also just setting up a really close proximity network. 5G is going to allow for gigabit level speeds of data transfer between devices that are all very close to you. So that interaction between something that's sitting on the bridge of your nose and something that's sitting on your wrist and something that's tucked in a pocket could all be transmitting information at gigabit plus speeds, and sort of enable that separation out of devices.
Will that take the place of Bluetooth, or is that not even a question? Is Bluetooth just super slow in comparison?
Bluetooth is as much a protocol as it is the actual wireless that carries it. So I don't know the standard super well, but I could imagine something where the next spec of Bluetooth uses 5G technology as the baseband to carry it, and the actual pairing still happens through the Bluetooth protocol. Or it could get swapped out for something else. There's a bunch of wireless standards out there. But I think the more important part is sort of the disaggregation of devices on your smartphone into other things that you carry with you. So when I want to upgrade my camera, I don't have to upgrade my whole phone. I just upgrade the camera component that sits on the bridge of my glasses or wherever that camera component ends up.
Yeah, that's the one part that I'm not sure that I buy into, just because of, well, no. I mean, in terms of the ability to swap out different modules, and upgrade kind of in a bespoke manner.
Right.
Because the way that everyone's driving down prices and also driving down size is, through optimization of and kind of vertical integration from a hardware engineering perspective. I forget what Google called it, but they had this idea for, maybe it was Android One or something like that, where there would be this Lego set.
Yeah, that was Project Ara. I think it was ARA.
Yeah, it could be.
They were called it.
Yeah, that's
and
it.
It never really saw the light of day because it was infeasible.
Right. I mean, you have technical issues, but then either those phones became much larger or were much more expensive because you have unlimited modules that you can put in. You're not getting them as small and as compact as possible, and then you're not building as many as humanly possible because who knows what the split's going to be. Like, you'll never get to those economies of scale or economies of manufacturing.
I think to a certain extent, we're already seeing the breakout of devices. With the introduction of the Apple Watch, they were basically carving off a chunk of functionality and saying, hey, now that lives on your wrist. And it's a whole other device that we can charge you for. And everybody else sort of followed suit. And with the new AirPods that are two separate modules that talk back to the phone, I think, V1, they're just earbuds, but V2 or 3 of that, they could add some additional functionality into those AirPods. And I'm sure manufacturers would follow suit in that for Android type devices.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question. I mean, on the AirPods, you see that everyone, Jabra, Samsung, B&O, like Bose, everyone's creating like that version of true wireless, where there's no connection between you don't need that wire between the two earbuds. But they're also 2x the cost, or significantly more than the cost of similarly wired headphones. But that's definitely a direction that you're going to go. I totally see that there's more to it. The one thing when I think about the glasses versus the earbuds is that it's just a little bit of a harder sell for me, because we've been wearing headphones since the Walkman came out in like the early 80s, right? So we've got almost 50 years of kind of being used to seeing people with something on their ears. I think that, and it's something that you couldn't listen to music really otherwise unless you had like the boombox, and I had one of those too. But the glasses, I think, is a little bit different. I wear glasses because I have to wear glasses. I would love not to wear glasses, but to convince people, to do the things that you want to do, that you need to be wearing a pair of glasses all the time. I think that's for me, that's just like a little bit of a stretch. It's even a stretch, I think, in the business environment, where you've got a little bit more control, because it's like, wear these or don't, or find someone somewhere else to work.
Right.
But I think even there, you're going to start to see some challenges with adoption.
Yeah, but what if the new glasses, what if they actually just shot an image onto your retina and they could actually help focus the world for you? Like you could just adjust the focus that you need to match your glasses prescription already. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah, no. I mean, I think that, any smart glasses should have some sort of mechanism to help you see. Just like full stop, just like regular glasses would, if you had to wear them. I don't know. I'm probably like the old man, yelling, "Get off my lawn" on this one, but it's something that I don't think is going to go quite as quickly as everybody, hopes or expects. No one's gotten very far yet. So
yeah,
I'm just still a little skeptical. I do see people having more devices, and like we've been talking about, but I think that the path towards the full replacement of the smartphone is a really long path.
Yeah, see, I envision this dystopian future that's driven by advertisers, where every flat plane could be mapped out digitally, and then advertising could be applied onto it.
And this is where I think that's the challenge to adoptionism, because I do not want to live in that world. Personally,
right.
It's one thing if during the work day, and I had a very specific job that required me to be, kind of be using my hands as I'm doing whatever that job is, and there's information that can make me more productive and safer to do that job. But if I'm walking around just so I can see, ads for Coca-Cola
Amazon
and whatever, that just seems really, really awful. It's one thing if I'm requesting information because I need it at the moment, but the foisting of it, it's not cool.
I mean, they wouldn't even have to be applied to planes in the real world. They could just show up in front of your face, right? But the thing is, you might just shut it off, but for other people, it could actually subsidize the cost of the phone, the cost of their data plan. how much advertising they're willing to have shoved in front of their face.
Sure. My Kindle shows me ads whenever I'm not reading. Not that I'm looking at the Kindle when I'm not reading, but it was $20 cheaper to do that.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that we've arrived at sort of a depressing conclusion.
No, I mean,
this is often the case.
No, I mean, I think one thing, and this is something that when I was at the ET6 conference, a couple of months ago, you hear a lot of talk about, is the smartphone era over, and things like that, and some of that is, we've been doing this for, a period of time. I mean, if you think that this is a 10-year-old market, it's nothing compared to we've been using computers for 5 times that. Length of time and computers still exist. So, but there's also everyone wants to jump on to the next exciting thing, especially maybe because that can advance their job opportunities going forward. So it's like, oh, smartphones are over, and now it's all machine learning and AR and VR, but all of those things can be done and are being done on the device. So I don't think that the smartphone is over by any stretch of the imagination. CNN reporting be damned, but I think that there's still a lot of runway. I mean, when you think about what's possible now with computational photography for things like portrait mode on the device because of the processors on the device, and some of the on-device machine learning that we're just even starting to think about. Like there's not that much that's being done for on-device machine learning other than what perhaps Apple and Google are doing on the devices themselves. So I think that there's a lot of runway there to be taking all these cool technologies that we want to focus on, but still leverage the device itself. And especially when you look at the volumes of those devices that are out there. I mean, the number one AR device, most deployed AR device in the world is the iPhone.
Right.
As long as you've got iOS 11 on it. So I don't know.
Yeah.
We overreact sometimes.
That's a great point. And as Ned said earlier, with the power of the cloud, being able to do a lot of the heavy lifting, it certainly adds longevity to, probably a couple generations back of devices.
Yeah. And definitely you have to start to look, to Ned's point, you have to start to look at, what is the workload that I've got in front of me and how quickly do I need the answer to that question, as it were. And some things you're going to offload to the cloud. Other things you're going to need to do on the device. I mean, you think about like IoT and, fog computing is all about wanting to, based on some input from a sensor, you may have some action that you want to take. And sometimes you want to look at all that information in the aggregate and look for trends. And that's stuff that I think more naturally leads to let's process this in the cloud. And if we don't have that answer for, an hour, a day, a week, because we want to collect more data to try and get a read on that, that's cool. And that's where you should do that compute activity. But if you need to, if the pressure on a valve is getting too high, you need to do something about that right away. And you may not have time or perhaps not the connectivity to wait for, let me send that information up to the cloud. Let's wait for the cloud to figure out what I should do and then send it back. Like sometimes those things could be too late. So you really need to look at the workload and the activity that you're trying to accomplish and decide where you want that workload to occur. Sometimes it's going to be device, sometimes it's going to be in the cloud, but you need to think about the capabilities that you have in front of you to make that determination.
That's great. Well, thanks guys for hopping on. Hey, Glenn, do you want to do a little pitch for the ETC? Glenn heads the Emerging Technology Council. Go ahead.
Oh, you mean right now? Okay, I thought you wanted to wait and set something up. So I will say that if you enjoy these types of conversations, if you can deal with me talking for too very long, then I would recommend for you to look to join the Emerging Technology Council. It's an organization that between Propelics and Anexinet and Lopez Research, with Maribel Lopez, a well-known analyst, we put together to help learn from each other. So if you're an IT or a business leader and you're looking at, how can we leverage and deploy and gain value out of some of these new emerging technologies like IoT, like AI, like AR, and you want to be part of the conversation and have an opportunity to learn from experts in the fields, but more importantly from peers, and share information to see, hey, I tried this and how did that go? Join us. Go to www.emergingtechcouncil.com. There's a join button in the upper right, and please come be part of the conversation. We've got over 350 members from like Fortune 500 companies. So it's a great community that we're continuing to build, and we'd love to have you a part of it.
Yeah, it's amazing what happens when you make it free.
And we don't show you advertisements of other brands all the time.
That's right. Brand agnostic.
Yeah.
So check that out, emergingtechcouncil.com. And also be sure to check out either or both of Ned Bellavance's podcasts. Those are Anexipod and Buffer Overflow.
You got it. You can just go to anexinet.com and we have our own podcast section.
That's right. All right. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
And thank you for listening to another episode of Device Squad, the podcast for the mobile enterprise from Propelics and Anexinet company. All right. Bye-bye, everybody.